Welcome back to another episode of Dentistry's Growing with Grace podcast. Join Grace and her guest of the week as they discuss lessons learned in the industry and explore unique insights into ethical growth.
Hello and welcome back to Dentistry's Growing with Grace. I am honored to have my friend Weston Lunsford here with me today, the CEO of Dental Intel. Weston, thank you so much for joining me.
Grace, thank you so much. I follow you and I love what you're doing for this industry and your positive vibe in the industry and not just in dentistry, but just in life. So thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you so much. I am just excited to be able to share some perspectives with people, talk about some things that are coming up, talk about where we're at currently in dentistry, even just the economy of dentistry right now and what we're looking at, and provide some people with some data that will be able to serve them moving forward. Weston, what are you seeing from your data right now? First of all, let's share with people what kind of data you have access to. Let's start there so that they take this seriously.
Yeah, so Dental Intelligence, the company that I work with, Dental Intelligence, is a data analytics company. We do have obviously a lot of workflow applications and solutions that help team members use data. But ultimately, we gather data from practice management softwares and financial softwares. We have just over 8,000 locations that use our service today, dental practice locations. And so that's a lot of data. And when we grab this data from these practices, we don't just grab 3 years worth of data. We go back from the beginning of time that practice existed. So we have data all the way from some practices have data sitting in their practice management software from the mid 70s, which is crazy. Even before I was born, insane, right? Now that's not all practice management data. Some of it's financial data because they didn't have that systems in there. And a lot of it is not transactional data. They were journal entries that were brought into their financial system. But there's a lot of good records where we really start getting a lot of data. Starts in the mid 90s when the practice management software started holding all of this information. And so when we integrate, we grab it all from the beginning of that practice's time all the way until today. And then every day we grab this information. And so we're sitting on a lot. We have more than 100 million patients in our database right now. And so we can start to see trends and analytics around what patients' behavior is. But we see a lot. And we use this metadata. For our customers, we send back their data and then some metadata to get them relativity around how they're performing. But for us, and especially since COVID-19 hit, we've been doing a lot of study on what really is going on and the impact that COVID-19 has had with practices during that period and the impact it's having on the immediate recover when most practices started opening back up in June. And if you're one that's listening that's not open, I'm sorry. I'm sure you're hurting. And there are several practices out there based on the circumstance that they're in and the city that they're in that they're still not open today. And our hearts go out to you guys. We're cheering you on. We're praying for your success. We want you to be successful and we hope you're able to recover quickly. But we see a lot of practices that have had a huge recovery already. And but we also see a huge warning that's coming up right now. But we have a lot of data. I mean, this is a lot of practice information and it's a lot of patient information. Can I share a couple stats just for fun?
Absolutely.
And Grace, if I'm talking too much numbers, I geek out on numbers. So if I talk too much, say you're way over the head of our listeners, are not going to care about that and you're not going to offend me.
No, I'm really good at interrupting people. I've gotten really good at that. I want to really talk. First of all, I want to preface this with our goal here today is not to scare anyone. It's not to put fear in anyone, because when you look ahead and when you do the right thing and you're focused on taking care of your team and you're focused on taking care of your patients, you're going to get through this if that's what you want. What we're trying to do here today is paint some broad strokes, take all of this data, all of these metrics, and show people where we're projected to be and where we're headed, and maybe even talk on what we can do to give our listeners and our viewers a bit of an advantage and some support in their business. So
Awesome.
yeah, let's dive into some of these numbers.
Well, I'm going to try to share. And if you're not, actually, you're going to have to let me share if you can, Grace. And I can't share right now. And if you're listening to this via podcast, we'll make this available on a hyperlink that I'll give you, Grace, that they can click on and just look through these images. But I'm a very visual person. I don't do good just with auditory. And so I like to see information, especially data on charts. And so I'm going to share some of the stuff and I'll talk through what we're seeing. And then you'll need to tell me if you can see this, and I'll get rid of my camera. Can you see this, Grace?
Yes.
Okay. So the big concern right now, and look, the chart that I'm looking at is the average scheduled production in the practices across the country. And again, this is over 8,000 locations that we're looking at here, and their average daily scheduled production for hygiene. Now, Grace, you can see each of these days back in January 1st. There's some low days throughout there. Those are Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. We work in the one industry where most dentists just take off either all day Friday or half the day Friday, and I love it. It's great. It makes my Fridays really good. So I don't want you guys to change that, but that's why you see these ups and downs throughout this average hygiene schedule day. You can obviously see what happened during COVID-19. So about March 15th and really through middle of June or first part of June when practices started coming back up. But if you look at this chart, what was really fascinating for us and what we were really hoping is not just a recovery, but a slingshot. And sometimes when you see downturns in, for example, the market, in public markets, you'll see really more of a U-shaped recovery. It's rare that you see V-shapes. COVID-19 provided this V-shape, and we're seeing the same thing. We had an immediate drop, and then we saw this immediate recovery when practices opened back up in June, which was awesome. The problem is there was this 6 in some practices, 8 weeks, in some practices, 12 weeks worth of time that they were not seeing any patients at all. They were closed. They may have been doing some restorative work, but there was no hygiene going on per the recommendation. And you can see now this chart shows some hygiene. That's not completed hygiene. When we look at the completed chart, it's gone. There's nothing. This is scheduled hygiene. And these are practices that for one reason or another just didn't get it broken. When we talked to those practices, they said, yeah, they left them on the schedule so they knew they needed to get those patients rescheduled, and it was the easiest way to deal with that. But there was no completed hygiene during this period. Very, very little. It's not significant to talk about. But notice in July, like right where we're at right now in first part of August, it's insane. The amount of scheduled hygiene is higher than it was pre-COVID-19, the dollars of scheduled production.
It definitely aligns with what I'm hearing people say on a day-to-day basis, you know, putting off meetings with advisors, and they're too busy they're just keeping up. And the concern here is that they're not making time to prepare for this dip.
Well, you can see this big dip, and they have this false sense of security, right? Because they're so busy right now, there is this false sense of security, and it's not good. They need to make time for this. They need to make time to talk to their advisors. They need to make time to reach out to their coaches and consultants and experts that are looking at some of this information, because you're so busy with your patients right now, you guys, which is great. But a lot of practices are not looking in the future. And even when I bring this up to a few of the practices, in fact, it was Dr. Sully Sullivan. I don't know if anyone knows him, but he's really bright. He's an incredible individual. A good clinician, phenomenal business owner, probably a phenomenal clinician too. Should have said phenomenal at both. I have never received work from him, so I can imagine he's good, but he's really good at business. He was one of the first persons that brought this up to our attention. We weren't even, as a data company, really looking this far into the future, but he said, you know, I've got a big issue coming up. We were closed, and so we weren't reappointing. My staff and my team is usually scheduling. My schedulers are usually needing to fill about 15 to 20% of the schedule. Right now in my practice, come this winter, they have to fill 80% of my schedule. They don't have the time to do this. There's no way they're going to have the time to go through this. And you guys, data does not lie. In fact, when we look at this, we know what happened. There was just no reappointing going on. I mean, there was absolutely no reappointing going on because you weren't seeing the patients. And so come your September, end of September, October, November, and December, there is not any hygiene scheduled in your practice, or it's about 60 to 70% of what typically is scheduled in your practice. And there is not a practice out there today that wants to see a 60 to 70% hit in their hygiene department. We know that that's going to have a huge impact on their restoration side as well, because hygiene leads so much into that. So we've got to get ahead of this. And this is, I just want people to get aware of this. And look, we can talk about some solutions. We have some thoughts. You have some thoughts. I mean, generating new patients is key for you and your service, Grace. And we do need to fill the schedule with new patients. We always have to have new patients coming in our practice, but we also have to take care of our patients. And we can't assume that they're just going to come in, because the reality is, so as a patient, I don't think about my teeth. Unless they're hurting, I'm really not thinking about it. Now, that's not true for me because I'm in dentistry. I think about it. But for the most part, patients don't think about it. And we have to be doing that thinking for them and look ahead, or we're really going to be suffering come this winter. And I don't want that to happen. And that's right before Christmas. No one wants that to happen right before the holidays.
I want to talk on, I did have a recent interview with Joanne Tanner. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about this, and she was talking about being proactive in the sense of looking at what patients can you appoint, maybe based on their insurance programs. Each insurance is different. I even hesitate calling them insurances, but each dental benefits program is different. And some allow for you to have 2 in a calendar year, but they don't necessarily have to be 6 months apart. So proactively looking at what does your patient's benefits program allow, and educating the patients to get them appointed, getting the team proactively scheduling for this time. And in my opinion, this is my world that I live in, is new patient acquisition, is how are you communicating with your community? What messages are you putting out? How are you staying connected? And how are you bringing in new patients? You're going to have time to serve them. You're going to have time coming up. And have you built up that new patient acquisition strategy to be able to do that? It's the time is right now to think about these things. Please don't call me. You might not think
you have time, right? They might not think they have time right now, and a lot of them don't. There's another issue going on right now. We have a lot of practices that they're not fully staffed again. It's not that they don't want to be fully staffed, but they can't get their teams in yet. Part of it's because of the additional federal unemployment aid that was sent out. And they're making, some people are making more money at home than they were making in your practice. I think that's supposed to expire this week, I believe. So that could be a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's a good thing for the dental practices because they can get their team members back in. And look, we can't necessarily judge our team members that aren't coming back in. This is a difficult time for everyone. We need to have compassion, try to put ourselves in their shoes. Some of our hygienists and front desk team members are working moms as well. Their daycares are not open. It's just a different environment.
That's one thing, Weston, I don't know what the schooling is like by you. My kids were in public school. I just found out. School's not opening. There's either a fully at-home learning option or a two day a week, like 5 hour, like it. I could never fathom this. I never in my wildest dreams could fathom this happening. And I'm just wondering how are we going to get through this? My biggest, we will. And my biggest advice for people facing these obstacles is, one, get creative. Have faith that we are going to get through this collectively, and get creative on your solutions. So if you've got to, let's say, do some sort of at-home learning, how can you group up with other parents and provide a safe and functional learning environment for your children while you're coping with these changes? But even that situation involves planning and intentional planning. So,
but as a business owners, Grace, we have to be thinking about that. If we want to get our hygienists back, if we want to get our dental assistants back, if we want to get our front desk team members back, we have to be thinking about their family situations and how we're going to navigate through this fall, especially when school's supposed to be going back. And we're typically used to our children getting there. And even here where I'm at in Utah, we're not full school, we're part-time school. I don't know exactly how it's all going to work out for sure. They're still identifying some things, but it's not going to be the same. I'm gonna share my screen one more time because I do want to walk through just a process, a step-by-step process of how to identify really how many patients our practices are going to have to schedule this winter. I call it fall, but it's not really fall. It's really the winter months. I think it's late fall and winter months, but there are some steps that I would like people to see and understand that they need to go through. The first step that you should do in your practice is identify the average number of hygiene visits per month. How many did you typically see before COVID-19? What did that look like? That's not that difficult to figure out. And if you don't want to hammer through that, you guys can call us and we will give you that information at no cost. We want to help lift this. I'm a big believer that rising tides lifts all ships. And so whether you want to pay us to do this or not pay us, I don't care. We'll do it at no cost. Or you can go into your practice management software and go calculate this, or work with your coach or your consultant if you have one and calculate out how many average hygiene visits did you have per month. What I would do is look at maybe even the first half of 2019, January through March, or the last 6 months before COVID-19, and just look at the total hygiene visits and divide it by that 6 month period, and that's going to give you your average. Most practices on average right now that we see are seeing 250. Now there's some that are nowhere near that, and there's some that are way over that, but that is the average out of all the practices in our database. It's 250 visits per month. So step two is you've got to identify how many hygiene visits you already have scheduled come this winter or fall season. What does that look like? Where are you? Are you 50%, 60%, 20%? Where are you at? What does your winter season look like? Step three, you need to calculate how many more hygiene visits you need. Now here's an alarming number, Grace. On average, it's 400 for all the practices that we're looking at. Meaning they've got to schedule 400 patients to get their hygiene chairs full come the second half of September, October, November, and the first part of December. That is a lot of patients to try to dial in. And I'd like to, by the way, the final step is your team, you've got to create a strategy on how you're going to get these guys scheduled. Some of you might not think, I'm not going to have any issue. I have so many patients that want appointments. Well, great. You still got to get them scheduled, you guys, and that takes time. On average, it takes 13 dials to get one of your patients on the schedule. That is crazy. We know that's true. In fact, we talked to Corey at CallForce, who has a service to reach out and call. We measure this too from our technology of team members calling. We track the number of attempts per the scheduled appointment. And on average, and Corey is right next to us, we're sitting at 13 dials per scheduled appointment. So there's some options. You can have your team members manually schedule patients through ReCare efforts, get them on the phones. They love it. Ask them. Ask your team members how much they love getting on the phone and calling patients. They don't really like it. It's like they don't want to do. They'd rather focus, right, Grace, on the patients that are in their office right now versus trying to get on the phone and get a hold of patients. Because look, the reason why is because it takes so many attempts to get finally a connected tissue going on there. So they could do that. They could implement some form of online scheduling campaign. They could hire a third party like a dental call center. There's a few of them that are really good out there that do a decent job getting patients scheduled. It's expensive, but they get them scheduled. And it's better than not doing anything. Obviously, they can increase marketing to fill their schedule with more new patients. That's a huge thing that they can get done, and they need to do that anyways.
And they need to do that before they're experiencing the dip, because
Right.
marketing is it's not an overnight. You start today and you're overwhelmed with new patients tomorrow. It takes a few months.
If they call you, Grace, in October when they're suffering, it's too late.
They're all going to be calling me in October, and I'm going to do my absolute best to help as many people as I can. But the people who get a jump start and carve out the time right now are going to be in a better position.
Yeah, because you'll get their schedules full before that time hits. And look, guys, we sincerely do not want you to miss out on production and miss out on giving the patients that you have the care that they need in order to get and stay healthy. So you definitely need to be implementing solutions right now before this season comes. I want to just talk just briefly about the online scheduling aspect of it, because there is an efficient way. If we have, if you look at how does the hygiene schedule fill up, like if we just take that concept, how do we fill our hygienist schedules right now? And we go through this January, and we look at this period of 6 months, it was all done through reappointment. What I'm showing here on this graph, this blue mark, is the percentage that was already scheduled during that period. It was already there before the period came. And then we had to fill 20% of the schedule. So 80% was already scheduled in your hygiene. Then we had to have schedulers work on the other 20%, or new marketing campaigns work on the other 20%, or sorry, new patient marketing campaigns focus on filling the other 20%. Well, that's oftentimes done by either marketing firms that you hire, or it's done by your front office schedulers. That's who's usually filling that. And this is what's going on right now, though. If you see this big box of this fall and / winter schedule, we now have this ginormous empty period that's sitting in here. This is way bigger than the 80% that typically is full. I mean, we're losing a lot. So when we look at the amount of months it's going to take to schedule, I know this might seem comical when I show it this way, but typically it takes about a month to get what normally they need to fill, which is only 20% of their schedule. Now they've got to fill 80% of their schedule. This is way too much time. You don't have the time. Even if you start right now, if you don't use something efficient to really help drive this, there's just not enough time to really dial this in unless you're using external sources to assist you get this done. So one of the things that I'd like to look at is these options. Have team members, when we talked about these team members manually scheduling, they need to do it. They got to get on the phones now. They got to be just active. And guys, if they're not active dialing, especially hygienists during their downtimes, if they have downtimes, which right now they don't. That's the tough part with this, Grace.
That's the hard part.
They don't have downtime. They're so busy right now. They don't have a way to focus on the winter.
And understaffed.
Yeah, they are absolutely understaffed. So here's something that I want to talk about. And look, we're offering this. I'm going to stop sharing really quickly. We're offering this at no cost for people because we just want them to use these tools to get their fall to winter schedule full. I'm not going to charge you money on this. We have what's called a patient finder. In seconds, in fact, I should just show you this, but in seconds, I can take your 3,000 patients and filter them down to who has remaining insurance, who needs a hygiene appointment right now, and even filter that down and say, I only want to focus on the perio because they're the higher dollar productions and they probably need the most amount of care. And in seconds, I can filter down my active patient list to a priority focus list. And we've already built these priority lists. Like you can just click the button, but you can go edit it. If you don't like the way we filtered it, you can go edit it. I promise you how we filtered it is the patients you want in your chair. But if for one reason you don't like the way we filtered it, you can edit it, modify it, and you have this list and you can click, send a text message to them. And that text message will have an embedded link for that patient to schedule. Just as an example, in June, there was 204 new accounts that signed up and brought this solution. So this patient finder and this online scheduling widget that's in the text message together, 204 of those that signed up. And as of last Thursday, so not this Thursday, are we Thursday today? So a week ago. So June, about 6 weeks worth of time, maybe 7 weeks worth of time, they scheduled 8,847 patients in that 6 week period of time by filtering down to the patients they wanted to schedule. Click the text message with the scheduling link, no phone calls. Yep. This was the patient that just now scheduled in that hygienist chair. And that's the best part about it. We know the hygienist that that patient belongs to. So we're only opening up that specific patients to that hygiene schedule to get that full. And you can pick the date that you want them to start scheduling. So if you want them to schedule as of September 1st, You choose September 1st and it'll open up your schedule that's available right then during that time. But and other
really just to recap my understanding of this. So they can run that report, and is it an automated email, or how does that work once you have that list?
Once you have the list, there's 3 actions that you can do. You can export the list and you can send it to, maybe you have Revenue Well or Solution Reach or Demand Force, or you have a marketing team like Grace. And so you can export it and send it to whoever you want to send it to, or you can then assign it to a team member, and they'll get a notification saying, I want you to call these guys. Those team members probably won't like that because the lists are big right now. I mean, there's a lot of unscheduled patients. But you can assign it to a team member, and then there's a workflow application that they can use, and the team members can work through it. Or you can just simply hit the button, send message. When you hit send message, it'll pop up a default message that we recommend saying. They can alter that message if they want, but it'll pop up a default message. So let's say that your list is 400 patients. They can hit send message. It'll pop up the message that's going to go to them. And then they can hit send, edit the message, or use our message, hit send. It'll text all those patients and or email those patients. It's up to you on which way you want it to go out to them, with the online scheduling link. And it'll say something along this lines: Grace, this is Weston from Dr. White's office. We see that you're not scheduled for your upcoming cleaning, and we want to make sure that you take advantage of your insurance, or whatever your message is. I mean, I'm not a wordsmith.
Right. It's going to be based on how you filter those patients,
right,
and what makes sense for your practice.
It's a specific message for those patients and how you filter it. Correct.
I love this. And as someone who is completely dedicated to the individual branding of each practice, this is a good time to go back, think about what you're communicating, think about your values that you're wanting to communicate to your patient base, customize that's in a way that's appropriate to your brand. You can even show some compassion in this short message, that we're here for you, we care about you, it's safe. We can connect this to your marketing program in a way that there's a lot of consistency, and you're building goodwill with people. One of the things Joanne Tanner also mentioned was, maybe you can even work out some sort of gift or giveaway for people who schedule within this time period. And so there's so much that we can do creatively, but
what we have seen though, when they send the message, the slots fill up really quick.
Yeah.
And the great thing is it's not causing phone calls, because your team can't handle the amount of phone calls right now. I mean, I'm telling you, I'm looking in these practices and calling practices. They're so busy right now, but it's giving them really a false sense of security. And I don't want to see a downturn in this market. You don't want to see a downturn, Grace. No practice out there wants to see their practice dip again, but they have this false sense of security because right now they're insanely busy, but they're not focused on September, October, November, December, and it's too late to focus on it when that month comes. So whether you use these solutions or not, honestly, well, I do care, but I don't care. What I care about is that you're aware of the problem and that you and your team are identifying some solution to fix the problem. That's the biggest message here. Just be aware of what's going on and figure out a way to get this fixed. So, and Grace, with what you do, you guys are always looking at the practice and what their best type ideal patient would be. I mean, you don't want to just attract all patients. You want to attract the ideal patient. And that's the same concept with your patients that are unscheduled right now. Before COVID-19, there was 62% of the patients on average that were not scheduled. That's crazy, right? Out of all of the active patients in our practices, 62% did not have a future appointment. Right now, we're just over 74% don't have a future appointment because of COVID. That's a big lift. There's a lot of opportunity with your patient base. But here's the crazy thing. Before COVID, if they were to get all of their unscheduled patients scheduled, like just get them all in within the next 6 months, the practices on average would have to increase their operatory space by 3.8 more operatories, almost 4 new chairs to handle their unscheduled patient base in a 6-month period. Now, marketing can help, and you need good marketing to communicate with your patients to keep your patients scheduled. But the problem is, because you don't have room, and especially now you don't have room to see all your patients, you don't want just any of them. You want the right patients, which is why filtering down to the prime ideal patients, those that have higher reimbursement schedules, those that have high show rates, those that have not just due for hygiene, but have restorative care needs as well. If I could choose a hygiene patient to sit in my chair today and I have limited space, I'd much rather have the 249 perio patient sit in my chair for that hour than the $129 prophy patient sitting in my chair for that hour. And so filtering, identifying your ideal patient is not just a win for you in production, but it's a win for the patients too, because those that have the highest production typically have the highest need for patient health. I mean, they need your care. So it's a win-win for the patient and the practice, but we've got to start giving these things some thoughts in order to be more productive, more efficient, and profitable during these trying times right now where our world's just in unrest.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most challenging things that a lot of us as advisors, people that are passionate about dentistry, we work to serve dentists. It's been difficult because a lot of the very early advice when COVID was coming out and hitting was cancel everything, save as much cash flow as you can, pull back, pull back, pull back. And there were a lot of people who knew from business sense that that's actually not what you should be doing, that you should actually be working harder to stay connected and planning and staying focused. And a lot of people have just buried their head and said, just let it pass. And if you did that with the first dip, I advise that you don't do that with the second coming dip.
Yeah, because it's going to repeat every 6 months. You're going to still stay in this cycle, and instead of having this slingshot recovery, look, we've got some practices that just get it and they're killing it, and they're going to have a better year production wise than they did last year, even with their 2.5 months of not open. But it's because they're on it. And speaking to exactly what you said, Grace, they didn't put their head in the sand. In fact, I know you didn't. I know we didn't. We didn't stop. In fact, we did get rid of unnecessary expenses. Obviously we did. We looked at it and we cut down, I think, almost $1 million of spend a month, as crazy as that is. And it was spend that we felt was unnecessary. And so we got rid of that, but we doubled down in other areas. So there were other areas where we said, no, we're going to spend more and more efforts. We spent more and more efforts on our account executive team to really help educate. And they all shifted on our customer success team to really bring confidence. And we decided we're going to spend a lot more on just nurturing and helping our practices figure out a way to overcome this. So you need to do the same thing in your practices. You guys are clinicians. Your first priority is patient care. But if you don't have a good business, you cannot give your patients the care they need. You've got to be good stewards of the best asset you own, which is your practice. And so reach out to Grace. She has phenomenal ways to fill your schedule. I know that. I follow her. I watch it. I see the results that she generates. And Grace, you do a phenomenal job in this industry. So thank you for your efforts. Sometimes I think people see what we do, you and me and other companies that are helping these dental practices as just companies that are trying to sell a service, but we both know that we're more passionate about that. There are times where I honestly believe that we care more about the success of a dental practice sometimes than the doctor even opens his eyes to. We're passionate about it. We want to help you guys. And so part of us coming to you guys today is really just making sure you're aware of this winter fall schedule, that you have sight on it, that you open up your practice management software, that you recognize you have an issue, and don't look at today or next week. We know you're great then. I know you're great through August. You're even great through the first 2 weeks of September. It's the second half of September, definitely October and November, where you're going to be struggling, and we've got to get on this right now.
Yep. We can create a plan and we can get ahead of this. One of the things too, as you're very overwhelmed right now, you're in a position where you're just trying to keep up, you're trying to get your team back, I want you to know, when you do engage with dental intel, the number one thing I hear from my clients and from my consultants is that it's simple. It's going to save you time. So if you're worried about this onboarding process or just one more thing you have to worry about, that's not what this is. This is going to give you time back. It's not going to be a burden on you. So just check it out, get ahead of this. It's not out of fear. It's out of wanting to help you succeed. and to show you what we see from the data that's coming up. So Weston, thank you so much for sharing this information.
Thank you. Tell me how, because I want, I don't know how this is going to go out, but I'm going to send this to our customers as well so they can see this. But if they want to reach you, Grace, how do we do that?
Thank you. Grace at identitydental.com. I am doing free marketing planning sessions, helping people look ahead and plan for their future. So,
okay, awesome.
Thank you.
And if anyone wants to reach out to us, just go to dentalintel.com. And we too are doing the same thing. We're giving you some tools at no cost right now, just to make sure that you can get your winter schedule up and running. And we want to help you guys. So reach out, use this data to your advantage. If you don't want to use us, go mine the data in your practice management software, but let's just make sure we get ahead of this, guys, so we don't see another downturn in our market. Grace,
Awesome.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here today. And for all of you who follow Dentistry is Growing with Grace, please join our group. We're actually changing our name from Dental Marketing with Grace to Dentistry is Growing with Grace, because we talk about so much more than marketing. And I look forward to seeing you next time.